What have Baptists contributed to the sciences?
How has science featured in Baptist missionary activity?
And how might Baptist theology shape how Baptists engage with science today?
My name's Tim Middleton, and I teach theology at Regent's Park College in Oxford.
And my name is Andy Goodliffe. I'm a lecturer in Baptist history at Regent's Park College as well.
In this series of short podcasts, we want to explore how Baptists past and present have engaged with the discoveries and practices of modern science. Is there something unique in the way that Baptists have tended to think about science? Are there good examples of Baptists who've been involved in the sciences? And is there any such thing as a specifically Baptist perspective on science and religion? Today we're joined by Saptarshi Mallick, Assistant Professor at the University of Graz in Austria, to talk about William Carey. Saptarshi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tim. It's really nice to be here.
So, Saptarshi, I wonder if I could start by asking you, people may have heard of the name William Carey, but could you just give us a brief introduction to who was he, where did he work, and why he's an important figure for Baptists?
William Carey was the first Protestant missionary from the Baptist Church of England, who was largely responsible for turning the tide of Protestant thought in favor of foreign missions and through the propagation of the gospel and into the lands where Christianity had not spread. At least that is why he came to India. And his journey to Bengal has actually permanently associated him with the British Orientalists in Calcutta and with Bengalis, and his passage to India has not only placed him in golden letters in the history of Bengal, to be specific, Bengal Renaissance, but also immortalized him with the honor of the Doctor of Divinity from Brown University in 1807. And for me, William Carey is a very important figure for Baptists, particularly within the Baptist missionary movement, because he's widely regarded as the father of modern missions. His influence helped to shift the inward-focused congregationalism of the Baptist denomination and many other Protestant groups into a globalized spread of the word. And at a very personal level, Carey remains my first love because I really felt that he was waiting there at Serampore when I started my PhD work.
So, you talked about Carey is a Baptist missionary, but this is a podcast about science and people in science. So how was Carey involved in science?
That's something very interesting because I have been engaging with Carey and his activities with the vernaculars in India, and that was surely, it had an intention to spread the word, but with time he emerged different and he became more transnational. He could break out boundaries. But when I was looking his engagement with plant science, it seems that, to my surprise, that Carey adheres to the yardstick of empire, where science and Christianity were intimately associated in the civilizing mission. And this perspective of Carey, while dealing with science, is different from the perspective he's dealing with the vernaculars, which is interesting and often embangling. And the science which was practiced by the Baptist missionaries was actually distinct in several ways to that of London's elite institutions or from the journals of the travelers in India. And at Serampore College, Sanskrit science, along with European science, was taught with the aim to establish the superiority of true Christian science, which would then actually facilitate conversion. So the engagement with science by the Serampore missionaries was also policy adopted by them to seek independence from the metropole. And this is very much evident quite surprisingly, in Carey's utilitarian point of view in his association with the practitioners of plant science, who were all based from the Midlands and not London. And
he was a lover of plants.
He was a lover of plants, yes, that he was from his early childhood.
Yeah.
But here is an attempt by Carey, along with the others, to prove the importance of Serampore mission when the British government was not very happy with their activities. But they kind of maintained a love-hate relationship because they required Carey for his linguistic abilities and also the mission press to print the books for the College of Fort William. And he was also forging relationships with old friends and re-establishing connections, which I believe is a very important strategy, and it interrogates the center-periphery binaries of historians, which are often attributed by historians of colonial science.
In very practical terms, what was it he was doing? He was collecting plant specimens. He was collaborating with colleagues back in the Midlands. He was identifying plants. What was the sort of science he was engaged in? Can we call him a scientist or someone who engages with science?
No, that's why I made. Yes, he's mentioned as a botanist in most of the documents, but he's engaging with plant science. He's not a scientist, but he's engaging with botany, and he's receiving seeds and saplings. He's naming them, and in that process, he's also documenting it, and he's creating an archive. And in that, he is not acknowledging. I mean, I don't find any evidence in the Hortus bengalensis, which is preserved in the Angus, that he is actually taking note of the local names. He's rather focusing on the Linnean binomial nomenclature. And so in some way, he's, again, subscribing to the methodology of the empire. And in that process, quite surprisingly, the local names get erased, or is not acknowledged, or is not known. Even Ayurveda is not referred to, which is very surprising, because Carey, according to my analysis, through Kathopokathon, is the first person who is documenting subaltern language, the language of the low class people, which was then not known. So he's doing that in terms of Kathopokathon by documenting the language, the daily life dealings of fishermen, people who are working in the fields. But when it comes to plant science, the native names are not taken into documentation.
I think we have to say he's a man of his times then. But is it right that alongside his collecting all these samples of plants, he's also got his own garden, and he's part of setting up a botanical garden? Is that right?
Yes. So he had Surampur at Surampur. He had his own garden, and that was more or less like a laboratory to rear these seeds and saplings. Yeah. And then once it is he's satisfied with their growth, it was transplanted to the Calcutta Botanical Garden. Sure. So this was again an initiative which Richard Grove critiques in Green Imperialism, but his aim was to enable people in India or people in Bengal to have such gardens, grow medicinal plants, and be self-sufficient in several aspects. And this is, again, very well associated that his entire activity in this garden is like a service to God, because that is, once again, he's mentioning in his essay on the study of nature, which was published in the Friend of India in August 1825. And which is reflecting his Calvinistic theory, the theology of nature, which where he believed in preservation and development and connecting with God and human beings.
It's very much he's driven by a particular theology in all of this.
Yes, absolutely. Because, in one of his letters to Wallich, which was written on 3rd December 1828, he wrote, and I'm quoting, "Pray, write to me and tell me all your concerns. I certainly, if I feel an interest in the temporal and eternal happiness of any man, feel a very deep interest in yours." End quote. Yeah, certainly.
So it's clear there's a fairly strong kind of theological motivation for Carey in terms of why he's interested in botany. I'm wondering if you can say a little bit more about how he saw it fitting with his missionary activity. Was botany also for him a missionary tool, a way of reaching out and evangelizing? How did it fit for him in terms of his missionary activity?
Yes. Well, he was a man of his time. So it will be, according to my personal reading, it will be very straitjacketed to put him into that bracket. But I can't even deny that. His interest in science was deeply connected with his missionary activity. That's true. And it's reflected his belief that God's creation was a form of worship and service. And now his scientific pursuits were not separate from his religious mission, because he was interested in botany, astronomy, agriculture, and linguistics, which all had a theological perspective. And he had the idea that introducing improved means of science, improved means of agriculture through agricultural innovations, botanical studies, medicinal plants, he could bring in people to know the development of science. He was not acknowledging Ayurveda. He was not acknowledging the indigenous practices. He's rather, there are several, I agree that the indigenous practices were not very healthy, but it's not being mentioned. Rather, it's being critiqued not in a harsh way, but it's being critiqued through the imperial lens. And in this way, he believed that he was demonstrating Christianity through practical care. And his Marshman believed that this would bring in conversion. It would bring all the people who were segregated by the upper castes in Bengal along with them, at least in Serampur, and that actually happened. And so at Serampur College, science and theology were taught simultaneously, and he was also corresponding with British scientists and was a member of the several scholarly societies. And his work in botany, especially in documenting Indian flora, gained him recognition among scientists, but he saw it primarily as a part of his mission. And it was also a strategy which he employed because they had to prove the importance of Serampur mission before the British government, the East India Company rather. So science for him was a natural extension of his faith and missionary calling. And his scientific work has often been considered as a hobby of collecting, preserving, but I believe it was more like a form of service. And for him, spreading the gospel included both spiritual and material transformation of society, and science was also part of that vision.
You mentioned just a second ago what was going on at Serampur College, in that both science and theology were being taught. Are you able to say just a little bit more again about what the thinking was behind that kind of type of education and why it was felt to be important that both science and theology are taught in the college?
At one side, they were teaching all these subjects so that, as the charter mentions, the comprehensive education of the youth. At other side, there was also subtly, there are hints to prove the flaws of the indigenous knowledge system and emphasize the importance of Christian science or Western science. It was not advocated by Carey. Carey never kind of did something like that. I can ensure you that Marshman was very much advocating this on these lines. But Carey's name and his consent comes with the charter where this is mentioned. So silently he supported it. But he may not have advocated it, but his name is there, signed. The trio's name is there below the charter and the prospectus of the college. So, yeah, absolutely.
There's a sense that you can't be a missionary in the late 18th, 19th century without some ambiguity about your motives and methods.
Yes, absolutely. There is I believe he was a Renaissance man. So on one hand, I will not call him imperial from this perspective when I'm exploring his dealing with plant science. But on the other hand, he is not absolutely critically cosmopolitan. So he stands in the mix because it's a different individual. It's a person with two different aspects when you are seeing him as a linguist, as a polymath, but when he's engaging with the vernaculars, the dictionaries, the Ramayana, the Kathopokathon, Itihasmala, everything is fine. He's breaking boundaries. He's reaching out to masses. He's spreading the word not as a missionary, but to spread human love, the necessity to treat each other as human beings. But when it comes to plant science, he's subscribing to that colonial lens. Yeah. So having said this, I will again mention that I'm not going to call him imperial. But surely he was seeing things in the context of God's blessings. And he could even say to that extent that when he lost his son, well, it is according to God's wish. He had this particular level of faith and association with God.
So do you think there are things then that we can take away from this for Baptists today? Is there something about the way in which Carey thought about science or used science or worked in science that is important for the way in which Baptists today think about how they engage with science?
Yes, definitely. I mean, every figure has something to inspire later times. But keeping all this kind of colonial interventions or decolonial reading, I believe that not just Baptists, I mean, everyone can draw inspiration from Carey's life, that lessons which are deeply relevant in this modern globalized world, which is often divided, especially love for human beings and feeling empathetic. So, I mean, his ideology or his perspective can be an inspiration to look beyond the local churches and see the global mission of the gospel. And I believe everyone, including the Baptists, can embrace a faith that is both local and global, and actively engaging with global issues like poverty, injustice, and spiritual need, while staying grounded in biblical convictions. So Carey was engaged with a series of social academic endeavors, and like translating texts, developing agriculture. He was fighting against social ills, but his life is embodied with a holistic mission. And Carey valued education, theological and scientific, and he believed that truth, discovery, and learning can glorify God. And this would equip people with the necessary training to serve others. I mean, that is what every missionary does, to serve human beings. And Carey's life is actual, and activities can be a blueprint for all of us, including the Baptists today. And we can learn from his boldness, his dedication. Well, I have some reservations regarding his attitude towards his wife. But in short, yes, Carey inspires me. I mean, Carey inspires everyone in Bengal, the Baptists today, to be thoughtful, courageous, and globally minded disciples of the Lord.
Thank you, Saptarshi, for just helping us see a little bit more of who William Carey was. Again, a name well known, but you've helpfully drawn out something more of the fullness of his love and commitment to plants and mission, but also some of those entanglements and challenges around being a missionary in the 19th century. Thank you.
And thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. And do join us again for another episode of Baptists and Science.
These podcasts are brought to you by the Centre for Baptist Studies at Regent's Park College, University of Oxford. They were funded by a Science for Seminaries grant from the ECLAS, Equipping Christian Leadership in an Age of Science project at Durham University.
The music is by Alan Carey, and this episode was edited by Alan Carey.